Hello, everybody, and welcome to Public. I'm Kinsey Grant, and I am your host today. We are about to start what's sure to be a phenomenal conversation all about artificial intelligence and the resurgence of interest from corporations in this technology due to the immense success of, I'm sure you guessed it, ChatGPT. Today, we are talking with ROBO global analyst Zeno Mercer about the corporate race for artificial intelligence innovation, and of course, what all of that means for the future of artificial intelligence, this future of AI. So, Zeno, welcome to Public. How's it going? How are you?
It's going all right. Thanks for having me on today. Nice to chat about ChatGPT and all the generative AI and technologies that are happening.
Absolutely. It's super exciting. It's something I am particularly really interested in. I have come up across ChatGPT, especially over the last couple of weeks in the work that I do as a writer, as a journalist. It is a little bit unsettling here and there, but it also is really cool technology and certainly something that I'm sure all sorts of people are encountering in their everyday lives, whether that's their investing lives, their work lives, their personal lives. It's just super cool. We've gotten a ton of attention to Chat GPT over the last couple of weeks, especially. So what we want to do today is basically just understand it a little bit better, understand AI tech, and to your point, generative AI tech, especially. So with that, let's kick things off.
Yeah. Okay. So, to back up for everyone here, just maybe first, what is generative AI? It's a form of artificial intelligence that's used to analyze and generate novel content, but it's using all these levers and tools that kind of helps it understand context in the way that we do as humans, to understand the relationships and contextual meaning behind everything and how that can be used to generate and create new content or understand existing content from new content. So it kind of can be applied to many different things. The story goes back pretty far for AI and generative AI. I mean, if you go back to 1997, that's when IBM. I know, going way back here. You're like, I thought this just came out. But that's when IBM's Deep Blue beat an international grandmaster. Not the best in the world, but just kind of like AI creeping into different elements of society. 2001, we had Smarter Child, and I really like the year 2010, and I'll tell you why. Azure Cloud was launched, which is actually what OpenAI runs on, right? I mean, not that version of Azure Cloud. It was very basic compared to what it is now with all the NVIDIA AI chips, but that's when, kind of cloud was born. Siri was launched in 2010. So Siri's 13 years old. And also Bitcoin. So you had three big kind of things that are underpinning conversation today. They were born that year. And so looking forward, we've seen in the past year, lots of interest and intrigue because for the first time ever, really, it's in an interface browser that anyone can manipulate and use. That was ChatGPT. Also Dolly and other image and other transformative and generative AI technologies that are in the browser on your phone. Whereas this has mostly just been behind closed doors and in research laboratories at universities and organizations. So that's kind of where we're at today.
Yeah, and I appreciate you illustrating the context, especially of why we're having this conversation around ChatGPT. It's not just because this technology is a point of interest or a point in conversation that we're having today. This has been in the works for a really long time. AI tech broadly, generative AI tech broadly, has been a technology that has gotten a ton of investment, that has gotten a ton of research and development over, the past couple of decades. And you mentioned Smarter Child, which, any like millennials out there who are listening to this or are watching this probably remember AIM, chatbots with like Smarter Child, and it was pretty rudimentary, right? And I think that what is getting people so amped up right now, and depending on what kind of internet circle you're running in, either really excited or really freaked out by ChatGPT, is that it's just so much more sophisticated, number one, and number two, that it is broadly accessible to a lot of people. But before we get into the kinds of pros and cons and the industry interest, especially in technology like ChatGPT, I'm curious about the broader possibilities for generative artificial intelligence. With the success of ChatGPT, we've had a lot of conversations about what AI can offer. I would love if you could explain some of the capabilities that you think might emerge from this renewed interest publicly and in pop culture, at least, in artificial intelligence. It's not just the chatbots on AIM. It's not just the robot that beats somebody at Jeopardy. There's a lot of possibility here. Walk me through some of the big buckets that you see those possibilities.
Right. So compared to kind of previous technical innovations like the iPhone, the internet, the internet enabled everyone to communicate and share data. The iPhone put that in your hands and allowed a whole new slew of technologies like Uber and things that people didn't even think of before, or if they had thought of it, it wasn't the technology and infrastructure. You might hear me say the word infrastructure a lot on this call. Wasn't there, right? People can think of things. Things are ahead of their time because the pieces of communication, cybersecurity, all these facets, identification aren't there to make that play. So now, while we're kind of in this new generative AI era, if you will, I don't know if we'll call it the era, but things are different now, and I think people are understanding that. This has impacts across all facets of society. Think about a child learning, the education, personalization. You've got lack of teachers available, teacher per student count is pretty low, not in the US, but also abroad. Just best practices and technology is going to be more decentralized and able to deliver best services for more people globally. So there is a deflationary impact and a distribution impact here as we'll see that impact everything from legal services, healthcare services. We might see, AI being trained on more wearables data. I think we'll see more wearables companies pop out using this technology, whatever format that may be, to provide more accurate information. And that will improve clinical trials, that will improve healthcare outcomes, and give people more, um, accurate and unbiased information. Because a lot of times getting access to a doctor can be difficult or impossible. Your insurance coverage might be weird. And, I think for years we've kind of been in this mode of the internet: search, seek, find, and now it's going to be more proactive and just come to you based on insights that are derived from data. So we're kind of going from a help me do it to do it for me society with AI across lots of different areas. So I think that's a big societal shift, and it's going to trickle through various forms. We have the text version, but ChatGPT is just a simple interface. It's not meant to be a product by itself. It is. It actually works for simple ad hoc things, but it doesn't piece together the full information and context around macro or micro level situations and groups and organizations. I think we could even see an impact on government, where right now you don't really see people submit what they think they need on constituents level. That goes into a bundle. They kind of hear and take all that information, but AI could actually help synthesize and analyze and provide unbiased answers and let citizens know what they actually said collectively, and maybe even help find solutions. So I think we actually might find some improvements in governance too, through the use of generative AI, kind of synthesizing and helping understand problems and finding solutions. So I think you'll see solutions like that start to emerge. I'm not saying we're going to have AI laws per se, but you're already seeing AI being used in the legal landscape, for summarizing contracts and generating. So it's hard to point out an industry, and actually I guess I should say we recently did a survey, um, at ROBO Global, where we sent out to around under 500 people, and the demographics were equally spread from 18 to 60 age, or 60 plus. And what we found, and we were asking about GPT, we're asking about ChatGPT, generative AI, and essentially what we were trying to find is like how many of them, and that we did this in the last 30 days, like had heard of generative AI, ChatGPT, had ever used it. So we found that around 31% of the people surveyed had actually used GPT, and 11% use it often. So that's just one of the technologies. Like Microsoft has their Bing. So this is just one data point, but when we have more details, like we can talk about within that. But there were some interesting findings there.
Yeah, super interesting to hear those stats. I think especially because it's very difficult to specifically qualify and quantify, how interested people are, how much information people are getting about something that, to your point, could represent the very beginning of a significant shift in user behavior of technology that could translate into a broader societal shift. That is significant. And you brought up Microsoft. I think that the natural segue here is this idea of when we're at that feeling of being on the precipice of a major change. Certainly, corporations, companies are going to be interested. They're going to want to understand, number one, how they can get involved, and number two, how this kind of technology might best benefit their interests. Microsoft is a great example of the big tech giants, so to speak. It's made this investment in ChatGPT's parent company, OpenAI. It's not the first investment that they've made in OpenAI, but this one specifically has been understood to be a means of integrating ChatGPT into Microsoft's products, including Bing. So let's talk a little bit about this investment, about this tie-in. Do you see this as a major moment for Microsoft? Obviously Google is kind of the one to beat when we talk about search engines. Bing has been around for a while, but certainly no Google. Do you think that ChatGPT is going to change that reputation for Microsoft's Bing?
I think the GPT-3 being implemented across all of Microsoft's technology is a big pivotal moment. I've already been playing around with GPT on working with Excel data and helping not just create formulas but summarizing information. So it's already being a part of my workflows, and so I would definitely say I'm an early adopter compared to some others. But people are that's going to be more standardized, and that process is going to be trickled out. They're going to train people. They're going to make it super easy, and anyone can use it. So yeah, it's a big pivotal point for them. However, GPT is also accessible on Google Sheets. It's accessible on other platforms. So while they have this lock-in, they are benefiting from utilization, given that it is running on Azure Cloud. So that is one angle where like they can make money. If this makes money just from licensing fees or direct usage on ChatGPT subscriptions, like they do have obviously incentive for that to work and grow up. But it's also licensable and accessible by other parties, which I think we'll see more apps come up. I think even just code development and app development becoming more simplified. So I think we'll see more personalized applications that could, compete with some of these tech giants products, which is going to be interesting to see how they play with providing the infrastructure versus, watching and seeing how their core revenue streams across, enterprise and consumer products shift and change.
Yeah, and to your latter point there about the products and how those shifts in products might trickle down to impact the actual numbers, the ones and zeros and the balance sheets and all of that for these big tech companies. I'm curious about how some of these other big tech companies outside of just Microsoft might be getting involved in AI, and of course noting that many of these big tech companies use artificial intelligence already in certain ways and shapes and forms. But when we're having this conversation specifically today about generative AI, I'm curious which of the big tech players you think are best positioned to take this moment and kind of seize it, if you will.
Well, it would be remiss to talk about generative AI without talking about in 2018, Google launched BERT, which is kind of one of the initial AI papers on this topic. And so and then the technology was released, the transformers. So, Google and Alphabet are in the Google Brain team, definitely pioneers here. And, while, they might have had a flop, if you will, by the public on their initial launch. This is still early innings. The tech is going to be fine tuned and fine tuned and fine tuned. And I keep thinking about having an F1 car with just like someone who hasn't driven before taking it behind the wheel. I'm like, this is a very impressive feat, or even a rocket ship. And it has to be fine tuned. You have to understand how to use it, and you have to have a cockpit and a user interface to understand how to use it best. And right now, it's kind of having this amateur person behind the wheel and being like, oh, look what I can do. Sure, we're seeing Microsoft Bing / Sydney going off the rails a little bit, and that's a whole different conversation. But so Microsoft has plays. Meta just released a large language model, and called Llama, and idea there is that they're claiming, and I haven't really had much time to play around or talk to people about it too much, but that they can run this with kind of basically less GPU, so less energy requirements, and kind of more accessible to more people. Now, that isn't to say the cloud model isn't accessible, but maybe that compute requirement could be a big competitive edge. So I think you'll see different use cases pop up for these different models and how they can be trained and used. Maybe there's advantages, but no one has really done a great study on that. And obviously, time will tell, and they will all continually be improving. I mean, this is March, hello March 2023, and by the end of this year, you're going to be seeing, every Fortune 500 company is going to be looking at how to implement some sort of this technology in their workflows. Users are going to be demanding how to automate certain things and basically, achieve laziness of achieving results. But that's what drives innovation, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned a couple things that I want to touch on. I want to come back to that idea that a bunch of these Fortune 500 companies or these major companies that are moving markets are going to be talking about this or investing in this kind of technology. We'll circle back to that one. But before we get there, you mentioned Bard, Google's their chatbot Bard that I think you might have used the word flop, I think, and that maybe was a fair assessment. There was I guess some questions, some issues during that test release, and especially kind of centered around this idea that maybe we're just moving a little too quickly. Maybe when it comes to AI and generative AI, that some of these companies are just moving a little too fast. They're reverting back to the old tech ethos of that Facebook used to have, move fast and
Right.
break things. We've come around to a point where we realize that might not be the best philosophy. So with that in mind, is there any concern that the movement on AI tech right now is just going a little too quickly, or that we maybe need to slow down? Is that a risk that people in the industry are concerned about right now?
I mean, there are lots of people that have, doomsday approaches or thoughts and sentiments around, releasing AI in the public hands. And, we're even seeing like generative AI manipulating robots and what happens if that were just kind of put in its autonomous world where it senses and reacts and analyzes. Because right now, generative AI requires a user input, but that input could also be environmental awareness, which that hasn't really been built out yet. But, combining computer vision and other sensors, you could kind of have a way where the input is its environment. But I think ultimately, though, these are mostly corporations putting out these models. You do have some private companies out there that are going up at bat to produce models and get market share here. But at the same time, if they don't, they've been working on these for years, right? Yes, it might be early, it's not perfect, but at the same time, they kind of have to do this. Game theory wise, if they don't release this, they're not going to get training data. They're going to get far behind. People are going to use and build companies off different platforms, and maybe that's just capitalism. And there always is kind of like a double-edged sword to every new technological innovation and release. But ultimately, it will. I mean, we're seeing some worse, bad use cases of like people messing around with Sydney on Bing and getting weird feedback from that. But I think there's more positive impact, and on the other side, is it ethical to not release something that could be transformative and help improve lives and be used for good? So I think there's like a couple ways you can look at it. So you have to hope that the good utilization will outweigh the bad, and people are going to be working at improving those different areas like healthcare, education, legal, etc. And
Mhm.
create creativity. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think this brings us to an interesting point that tends to crop up whenever we have a conversation about really transformative technology, which is this idea of job displacement, that AI could come in, I'm a writer, could come and steal my job and can write ad copy better and faster than a lot of other, copyright. There are all of these different examples, right? That AI is coming for our jobs, or insert really any technology there. Do you think that there's any merit to that concern that AI is going to create job displacement, especially in a tech industry that's already going through a lot of major shifts? We've seen a ton of tech layoffs over the last 6 or 12 months. Is there any concern that AI is going to either expedite more of those layoffs, or is going to, the phrase that people tend to say is "come for our jobs"? Is there any merit to that?
Yes and no. On one hand, you've seen what's played out. Let's look at kind of robotics and manufacturing automation, right? The countries that have the highest unemployment rates are the ones that have the highest utilization of robots for manufacturing. So maybe that won't be the case in the future, but I mean, I could see a world where you could just come up with a product that's shaped to you. Maybe it's clothing, and it's instead of off the rack, you have more easy custom clothing that's manufactured. You generate it, it's manufactured, and it's delivered to you without a human in the loop. And I think that point you're making right now is where's the human in the loop in the future with AI and robotics? And right now, I mean, there's plenty of humans in the loop across like creation, in warehouses and all sorts of jobs. Autonomous vehicles, though, is an area where you could say, what happens to those jobs? I think last time I was researching this, over the years, I mean, at one point it was like 3.5 to 5 million drivers is their primary job in the US. And that's trucks, taxis, etc. You also have lots of part-time workers. And yeah, I mean, on one hand, you might have 3.5 million people without a primary source of income. Some of them are going to retire. Some of them have other jobs and responsibilities, so that's not it. But you also have massive deflationary pressure where the cost and utilization of transit goes down a lot. You're going to have accidents go down. You have lots of these other positive externalities that are going to pop up. So um, it's hard to just look at it just in the lens of jobs without also evaluating what other positive impacts could happen from a technological innovation and advancement. In terms of, I mean, I think about can my job be automated? And sure, like I'm already automating elements of my job, like data synthesis, all these things. I'm still doing work though with that data and output. I'm using these tools, but eventually, maybe this job is automated and there's something else for me to do at that point. But I mean, that's obviously something I think everyone in the tech industry is thinking about as we've seen, the generative AI come for images and video even, and even 3D models. But then you have to think, okay, well, if anyone can create a 3D model, doesn't this make everyone a creator much more easily now? So, there's kind of like different tools come along, and that creates a different environment for people to take advantage of it.
Totally. And I think to your point, impossible really to untether the positive externalities from the negative. And that's just, the name of the game when we're talking about big technological changes like this one. All right, so let's get back to that. I mentioned I wanted to circle back to the idea that by the end of the year, we're going to see a lot more companies either invest in or debut technology that has something to do with this kind of generative AI that we're talking about today. In Robo Global's recent AI State of Awareness survey, 51% of respondents said that ChatGPT was a fad. I'm curious about whether or not you think that this is, something that corporations are just going to latch onto because it makes for a great headline, and then the investment doesn't really follow suit. Talk to me about this idea that this could be a fad that businesses are going to try to get in on because there's hype.
Yeah, I think this is where, and one of the reasons why we wanted to do a public survey was because we're very entrenched in this and we think about this all the time. And we see and talk to companies that are their number one goal is to figure out how to automate certain elements, whether it's supply chain, whether it's back end processes that are causing backlogs in their own internal processes or delivering solid customer service or products. And so over the last 2 years, we've seen massive supply chain issues. So we're seeing companies that are trying to be more agile and having alternatives to creating products like cars, for example. If something's missing, like how fast and agile can you be in making a move to make sure that you have something delivered in a product there because your top line's getting hit, your bottom line's getting hit, et cetera, et cetera. And I would say it is top of mind that these organizations are looking to implement all sorts of automation and AI, not just generative AI. Um, I think McKinsey did a survey in the last year where they did an enterprise adoption survey, and it was just over 50% had even truly implemented robotics process automation, which we kind of consider the low hanging fruit of just like automating, like if this, then, it's very rudimentary form of AI, to be honest. But it is a form of automating what had been a role that someone did, someone that sleeps, someone that might get sick, a lot of things, and maybe there's chokeholds there, and they're just finding more seamless workflows from the implementation of that. But that's a very low percentage. That's the highest. That's the highest adopted area. Sure, if you're like a robotics company or something, you might have an advanced manufacturer. You have computer vision and robotics automation for controlling the different parts that go along together. But we're still super early innings here, and I think that's something to keep in mind. Is that when I mentioned that I think that 100% of these companies are going to be using this in some way. That's a massive jump. It's basically going like, and then just like a leapfrog, like going up hundreds of percent or more of adoption. But that's because the results are very tangible now. Convincing someone that, hey, we can do this and it will solve these problems and help us create better customer service, like understand what our customers want, etc. I think it's the the conversion factor and difficulty for the sales cycle for implementing, and the consultancy groups and other players in the space are gonna, see a massive shift in sentiment from buyers this year. And that's obviously going to go downstream to all the infrastructure providers too, as the utilization grows. I mean, crunching all this text, crunching all of this, images and videos and 3D models and training them requires massive compute and connectivity. And you've got this entire infrastructure that goes into even just Azure AI, not even talking about Open AI. And each of these are going to have to scale and grow to keep up with the demand that's coming through. So that's something that we're tracking pretty closely here at Robo.
Yeah, certainly. And I think that's a fitting way to end this conversation with this idea that there's still a lot to be figured out and a lot to be paid attention to over the next 6, 12, 18 months and well beyond that as well. So thank you so much for all of this wonderful insight today. Zeno Mercer, Robo Global Analyst. Really appreciate your time and for all of these forthcoming answers. I'm excited to watch this tech unfold, and we'll have to check back in and see if that prediction about year end is an accurate one.
We'll see. Yeah, no, I can't wait to be fact checked on that. All right. Thanks for having me,
All
Kinsey. It's
right.
been great chatting today.